But I said to myself, you know, I think it would be fun to talk about some of my favorite tools. You might be interested in knowing what I can't live without and what I kind of recommend to many people when they're getting started in stamping or actually like to do it a lot. So the first one I like to talk about is the one that's right here that you see, and that's this black cutting mat. So this cutting mat, which is by Stampin' Up, can serve as a surface to work on in general because it's thick enough to facilitate stamping. So like it helps to have something somewhat soft, not too hard underneath you when you're stamping, but it needs to be thick enough, and so this one is. The back of it is, I don't know what this is, I guess it's a vinyl-y kind of a rubber, but also kind of indestructible. I've had it for a couple years now, no problems. It has measurements on all four sides, which means I can measure what's laying down on the surface both horizontally and vertically. So just by putting it in the corner, I know exactly what it is this way and this way at the same time. A little faster than using a ruler, not much, but a little bit. Also, I can use the grid to help me line up things. So if I place things in the middle of the grid, then I can either use that centerpiece to help me align something that I'm laying down on there, or I can just use it to make sure that you know, as I stamp, I'm stamping on a straight surface and not a crooked one. So there's a lot of uses for grid, but it's called a cutting mat for very obvious reasons. It's intended for cutting. So I'm just going to cut this sticky strip off, and that's because I'm going to do something later with this envelope. And all I'm doing is kind of putting the envelope down against the grid so it's straight, and then I'm putting a ruler against one of the straight lines on the grid. And this is also a Stampin' Up! Ruler. This ruler is hard, and when you're using an X-Acto on your cutting mat, you might want a ruler that's kind of hard, the metal edge rulers being the best. And so then I can just glide my X-Acto against the edge of this ruler to help me stay straight. And things cut literally like butter. I mean, it's just so easy to cut. I mean, even if I don't use the ruler and I just want to cut looking at what I'm cutting out, you just hold it down and I cut. And notice that the mat is not damaged by my cutting. You know, that's hence the cutting mat idea. And it's also very easy to, you know, kind of get around edges if you want to. So the X-Acto and the cutting mat are kind of like best buddies in my opinion. Really easy to cut, so that's the primary use of the cutting mat. But like I said, I love it for the grid lines, the measurements, the texture of it, the thickness of it for stamping. It's a great tool. Related to it, I'm going to show you my messy grid paper pad. So these pads are so that you can either take them off and put them like on a surface when you're doing a workshop, or you can just use them. I use them just like this, so the pad stays on my desk all the time, directly under the cutting mat. And so I like to use it especially when I'm stamping. Again, the reason being that if I wanted to stamp off, I'd just be stamping on off on the grid paper. And what's better when you're stamping off like that, you know, where you're going over an edge with the grid paper than the mat, is the grid paper, because it's really paper, the ink is going to dry almost instantly. Whereas there could be a delay in the amount of time it takes when you stamp off on your cutting mat for that ink to dry. And where's the danger there? If your card or whatever you're using leans against some ink that's not dry, it can pick it up from the cutting mat. It's very unlikely that it'll do it from the paper, especially if you're using plastic inks, okay? Of course, certain inks dry slower, so in proportion you'd have to be aware. But it's to me, it's the safest surface for, you know, trying to stamp off of things and not minding about it, you know, going off on the edge. It has the same advantages as the cutting mat as far as the grid and the measurements long way and horizontally and vertically. But also it has, I like on the side, so sometime when I'm working in my craft room, I'm kind of working on a design. I could actually use one of these grids as a card example and use that area, so I can say, okay, well this area, this square here or this square here represents the actual size of the front of my card, and I can do some practicing right on the grid paper of what my design's going to look like. And as I learn or I make decisions about that design, I might make notes over here as things as far as what I need to buy or in relation to that design. So I've actually cut this out before and put it into my journal, because I keep a journal of card designs. It also has all your measurements up on the top, so you can see card dimensions for gifts, for notes, for greetings, for mini square. In case you forget these, they're right there. And if you were in a workshop, you probably would really use the My Name Is, because you wouldn't want someone to take your notes. These are things that you plan to buy. It has room for you to put your item numbers in there in case you're at a workshop and you see a stamp you love. You could right away write down the item number or the name of the stamp set. That way you won't forget to order it at the end of the workshop. And it lasts a fairly long time, so I don't throw away each sheet like at every use. This sheet may have gone through 4 or 5 cards before I actually take it off and throw it away. Now another cool thing about this paper is I like the grid for journaling. So I take notes on these grid papers because I can write in all different directions. So cutting this up with die cuts is really cool to make your own circle journaling swatches. Like, you know, so if I cut out a whole bunch of circles of this grid paper, I can now stick it on my scrapbook page and use it for journaling. So there's a lot of uses for this paper. This is not a Stampin' Up! Product, but I had to talk about it because it is got to be a very favorite product of mine anyway. It is a craft mat, and so this is sold by quite a few companies. I think the first that I knew to sell it was Tim Holtz, but right now there's a whole lot of people that are selling it. And don't get mad at me if he wasn't the first to sell this, but it's a material that I cannot explain to you, but it's very slick and very thin, and it's indestructible, which means I can hold a heating tool over it and actually emboss right on it. It will not burn my table underneath. Also, when I'm working with inks like alcohol inks or pigment inks that are like can be used for coloring, when you put these inks down on the mat, now where you see that? So I can actually pick it up, and I know that's ugly, but I'm just showing you the ink doesn't dry on there. And that's good and bad. So when you're playing and you're trying to, you know, enjoy your inks, you'll enjoy that. But if you're working with something you're trying to keep clean, then you would wipe it. And so another thing that I keep always handy is baby wipes. Baby wipes for wet wiping, but a cotton cloth for dry wiping, depending on what I'm doing. And both of these are in my expression, they're rags. So the cloth I can wash over and over and over again. The baby wipe is going to be dispensable. I find baby wipes are really good for cleaning my stamps as well. They clean them safely and gently. So it's another thing that I love. I don't know if I was clear on this. It's non-stick, so glue won't stick to it, glitter won't stick to it, nothing will stick to it. Most things will just wipe off. Some things that get hard will have to be picked off or could be scraped off. And inks will not dry on here, so make sure you wipe them before you put something down that should be clear.